अस्सलाम वालेकुम स्टूडेंट्स। आज हम बीएससी का लेक्चर नंबर 13 जो कि एक ऐसे है रिटन बाय जॉर्ज ऑरवेल, हो द पुअर डाई। इसमें फ्रांसीसी हॉस्पिटल में एक ब्रिटिश जो कि मुसन्निफ़ है वो बीमारी की सूरत में एडमिट हो जाता है और उसके साथ पेश आने वाले वाक़यात के मुतल्लिक़ आज हम बात करेंगे। अस्पताल पर तनकीद करते हुए उसके ख़्याल में फ़्रांस के अस्पताल इलाज मुआलजे में बदतरीन हैसियत रखते हैं। वहाँ हर गरीब लोगों को इलाज मुआलजे की कोई सहूलत दस्तयाब नहीं है। मुसन्निफ़ को अस्पताल एक्स में दाखिला लेने के लिए इत्फाक हुआ। अस्पताल में दाखिला एक मुश्किल अमल था। मरीज़ों का दाखिला के वक्त मुकम्मल इंटरव्यू लिया जाता था, उनसे गैर ज़रूरी सवालात पूछे जाते थे, उनकी मुकम्मल छानबीन की जाती थी। दाखिले के जो बाद मरीज़ों को ठंडे पानी से गुस्ल दिया जाता था। मुसन्नफ़ नमूनिया का मरीज़ था। उस मर्ज़ में ठंडे पानी का इस्तेमाल इंतहाई सख्त नुकसानदेह था, लेकिन उन्होंने इस बात की कोई परवाह ना की। मुसन्नफ़ की और दूसरे मरीज़ों को जनरल वार्ड तक ठंडी हवा से गुज़र कर जाना पड़ा। जनरल वार्ड एक तंगो तारीक कमरा था। मरीज़ों के लिए बिस्तर साथ साथ लगे हुए थे। डॉक्टर और नर्सें बेरहम लोग थे। वो मरीज़ों के जिस्म को नंगा कर देते और जिस्म पर आबला बनाकर वहाँ से खून निकालते। ज़ख्म पर पुलटस लगाते। मुसन्नफ़ को भी इसी जुल्म का निशाना बनाया गया। सुबह सवेरे नर्सें आकर मरीज़ों को जगाती, वो उनका मुंह हाथ धोए बगैर उन्हें नाश्ता कराती। नाश्ते में सब्ज़ी के पानी का पतला शोरबा होता। डॉक्टर जब राउंड पर आता तो उसके साथ उसके शागिर्द तालिब इल्म होते जो मरीज़ की खूब जांच पड़ताल करते। मुसन्नफ़ बयान करता है कि अस्पताल एक्स मरीज़ों का ऑपरेशन नहायत ही ज़ालमाना तरीके से करता था। उनका ऑपरेशन बेहोश करने वाली जरासीम कुछ अद्वियात के बग़ैर ही किया जाता था। अस्पताल में जब कोई मरीज़ मर जाता तो उसके लवाहिकीन को इत्तला दिए बगैर ही उसे दफना दिया जाता था। मुसन्नफ़ का ख़्याल है कि इस ज़माने में इंग्लिस्तान के अस्पताल फ़्रांस के अस्पतालों से यकीनन बेहतर थे। वहाँ पर सफाई का निज़ाम फ़्रांस के अस्पतालों से बेहतर था। मज़ीद बरां इंग्लिस्तान के अस्पतालों के डॉक्टर फ़्रांस के डॉक्टरों के मुकाबले में ज़्यादा फ़र्ज शनास थे। इस लेसन में आज हम 4 पॉइंट्स डिस्कस करेंगे जो कि मेजर इवेंट्स हैं। एडमिशन ऑफ द राइटर इन हॉस्पिटल, कंडीशंस ऑफ द पब्लिक वार्ड्स, कंडीशन ऑफ अदर पेशेंट्स इन द वार्ड, रीज़न फॉर लीविंग द हॉस्पिटल by the author. First of all, we start with the first heading, how writer got admission in the hospital. Writer says that the miserable condition of the French hospital. In his view, the French hospital in the 19th century offered an ugly sight. The poor patients in the hospital were mistreated. They were left unattended to die. Life in the hospital was more distressing than that of प्रिजन। वो कहता है जेल से भी बदतर ज़िंदगी जो थी हॉस्पिटल में थी। इंटरव्यू बाय क्लर्क्स, सबसे पहले जब भी पेशेंट कोई हॉस्पिटल आता उसको प्रॉपरली डायग्नोस्टिक पर्पस के लिए उसका इंटरव्यू किया जाता था। द राइटर गिव्स एन अकाउंट ऑफ हिज ओन एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ गेटिंग एडमिशन टू द हॉस्पिटल। दिस रिवील्ड टू द राइटर दैट वर्किंग कंडीशंस ऑफ द हॉस्पिटल वाज very poor. The people suffering from pneumonia, the admission to the hospital was very difficult. The clerks put him through the usual third degree at the reception desk. Later on, they put to him unnecessary question for a long time. He answered their silly questions with patience. He was running temperature at 103 Fahrenheit but kept on standing. There was a long line of patients standing behind him. They were waiting for their turn to be questioned and interviewed. As per the author, this method of admission of the patient is wrong and terrible, as the patient is suffering in the queue. On the other hand, but the another thing which was very weird from the hospital, before admitting the patient, the hospital policy was to take bath the patient first. It was a general practice in the hospital that all the newly admitted patients were given a bath. The writer was undressed and he was made to sit in the warm water for 5 minutes. He kept shivering. He was given a linen night shirt and a short blue flannel crossing cloth and dressing gown. He was not given any slippers to wear. The ward was situated at a distance of 200 yards away. He had to cross the hospital ground before he could reach there. The writer was very sick and feeling shivering and temperature. Although he was not fully covered, moreover, he was a patient of pneumonia. The path to the hospital was wet and frosty. The wind whispered. The nightshirt of the author and his bare calves. Someone was holding a lantern in his hand. He reacted the word with great difficulty. Anyway, he reached the ward in a very difficult situation when he was not stable due to temperature and chest infection. Actually, here the author criticizes the hospital management that the management asks unnecessary question from the patients, which is total wastage of time. Another thing, condition of public wards. According to author, the public wards were filthy and stuffy. They were not properly clean, and there were beds very closer to other patients. The public wards of the French hospital offered a miserable sight. It was a ill-lit room It was full of murmuring voices. Murmuring voices, झुंझुनाहट वाली आवाज़ें, कपकपाहट वाली. There 3 rows of beds surprisingly close together. Beds were close together. There must be a proper difference between patient to patient as per the medical protocol. There was a foul smell of feces. A doctor and the students were performing a strange operation on a sandy haired man. He was sitting half naked. First the doctor produced from his black bag with dozen small glasses like wine cups. Then the student burned a match into each glass to exhaust the air. They were placed on the man's back or chest. The vacuum drew up a huge yellow blister. ग्लास के जो कप थेरेपी है, ग्लास को जब वैक्यूम क्रिएट किया जाता था उससे स्किन के ऊपर एक बहुत बड़ा छाला पड़ जाता था. The treatment was called cupping, blood drawing operation. The treatment was often performed on horses. As per the author, this treatment is only for the horses but not for human being. The next moment, the doctor and the students came across to the writer, but without speaking a word to the writer, they applied the same set of glasses on the writer, which had not been sterilized properly. जरासीम पुष्ट व्यास से इन कप्स को साफ भी नहीं किया गया था. The next point is this, but without speaking, writer, they only put on 6 glasses in his case. Each glass now drew out about a spoonful dark colored blood. जो कपिंग उसकी की गई पेशेंट की, उसमें से तकरीबन 1 चम्मच के बराबर खून निकाला गया. Another treatment given to the writer by the hospital management and doctors and their associates was given to the writer soon after admitting into the hospital. They mustard poultice was applied by the nurses on the wounds of the writer. They lashed it round his chest as tight as a straight jacket. वो इस तरह उसको बांध दिया जैसे कि एक सीधी तंग जैकेट हो. For the first 5 minutes, the poultice was buckled at the back. कुछ देर के लिए उस पोल्टस को, उस मरहम को उसकी कमर पे, पुष्ट पे लगाया गया. During the last 5 minutes, a sort of numbness gripped his body. उसके जो जिस्म था वो सुन्न होने लगा. इसके बाद क्या होता है ऑथर के बाद? During the last 5 minutes, sort of numbness crippled the body. After the poultice was removed, a waterproof pillow packed with ice was thrust beneath his hand. एक वाटरप्रूफ जिसमें पानी ना जा सके तकिया उसके सर के नीचे रख दिया गया. He was then left alone, अकेला छोड़ दिया गया. He could not sleep at night. At the 5 in the morning, सुबह 5 बजे, the nurses came round, woke the patients and took their temperature. They don't wash them. They did not wash them. As per medical point of view, first of all, patients are made neat and clean. They are washed, their hands and mouth faces washed. Later on, the treatment and the breakfast is started usually, but there was not a proper protocol in the hospital. The patient washed each other. Even as per the author, पेशेंट्स ने एक दूसरे को नहलाया धुलाया, जो भी किया, मुँह हाथ धुलाया. एट 8 ब्रेकफास्ट अराइव्ड. 8 बजे खाना आ गया, नाश्ता आ गया. इट वॉज वेजिटेबल सूप विद द पीस ऑफ ब्रेड इन इट. लेटर द डे अ ब्लैक bearded doctor made his round with medical student at his heel. There was more than 60 patients in the ward. It was not possible for the doctor to pay attention to the patients individually. If the doctor paid attention to some particular patient, it was with the aim of teaching to the medical students. The writer himself became a unique specimen of patients suffering from cough. A dozen students queued up to listen his chest. They handled the writer as if he was a piece of machinery. This was maltreatment by the hospital, according to the writer. As this essay was written in 19th century, at that time there was less health facilities in France. If we compare with the UK and French health system, no doubt French is far behind than the UK. The third point is to discuss conditions of other patients in the ward. What kind of conditions were there in the ward was we have discussed. Reasons for leaving the hospital by the author. What were the reasons behind the author run away from the hospital? Answer is that the writer was not happy with the atmosphere of the hospital. He found that poor patients were ill treated. They were not properly looked after. The admission to the hospital was very difficult. After admission, every patient was given a bath without knowing the nature of his illness. The writer was suffering from pneumonia, but he was given a bath. The patients in the hospital were given poor food to eat. When they died, nobody tended to their dead bodies. The writer felt dissatisfied at the sickly and poor conditions of the hospital. When he got back his clothes and ground strong on his legs, he fled from the hospital. जब वो कुछ चलने फिरने के काबिल हुआ तो वो भाग निकला हॉस्पिटल से. He didn't even wait for the medical discharge slip. He fled from the hospital as he found the atmosphere of the hospital gloomy and sickly. Moreover, the mental torture given to the patients during the treatment was unforgettable by the author. He found that the prison was more comfortable than the hospital. The writer tells us about the case of the notorious swindler, Madame Hanaud, who was ill on remand. She was taken to the hospital. After a few days treatment, she managed to run away from the hospital and came to the prison back. दोबारा वो जो है कैद खाने में वापस आ गई. She said that she was more comfortable in the prison than in the hospital. This is a satirical, these are satirical lines by the author against the hospital. The writer shared with the views of Lady Swindler in his regards. The total health system in the world is developing right now. More and more technological ways are discovering for treatment of patients, and state-of-the-art hospitals are being constructed by the private sector and the government throughout world. But in particular case of this lesson in perspective of France, France is offering great medical facilities right now. If we compare the French hospital with England hospital, there was a hell of difference. The French hospital was dirty, clean, unclean and stuffy as compared to UK hospitals, where everything was clean and patients were kept under extensive care. But the author was on visit to the in the France, so he has to undergo the French treatment. So he elaborates the total story how the poor die in that hospital. Thank you very much.